Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever time we catch you, we welcome you to Pro Saints Talk. It's just me and my main man, Jay, today. Jay, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I like these morning recordings. Went to Riccobono's on Panola, old uptown staple, had a Western omelet, couple cups of coffee. So I'm ready to go.
Well, Ron is celebrating and planning his son's bar mitzvah today, so mazel tov, Ron, mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Cherish these moments. I unfortunately can't attend my godson's celebration due to a nationwide pickleball tournament, so thank you all for your continued support as you come out to watch us go for gold tomorrow. But that's enough about our personal jibber jabber. We're here for the Saints, obviously, as we embark on a new journey this weekend in a rainy Baltimore. I see with actually a similar history to New Orleans, but a lot to get into with the game. Before we do that, let's go over what we've learned thus far in camp. And Jay, this is something in our group text and in our daily phone calls that I keep repeating. And here I am saying again on record, on the podcast, you can't win the Super Bowl in August, but you can certainly lose it. Now, of the less than stellar, pessimistic, no disadvantageous things to have occurred, let's start with Mike Thomas. So to catch everyone up to speed, Mike Thomas, late surgery. Reports coming out that he neglected to answer the phone call from the coaching staff, the medical staff throughout the summer, has a late surgery. Now he's missing a big chunk of the season. Duncan wrote a long, extensive Times-Picayune Advocate article about it. And now Mike Thomas is sending out these cryptic tweets. Oh, you don't want to hear my side of the story. I'm going to be quiet. I want to be quiet. And it's just another one of these instances of what is going on here with Mike Thomas. So, Jay, let's start with that.
Yeah, and I don't know how much time this deserves. We talked about it a lot last week. But my thing is it reminds me when Odell was with the New York Giants and he was putting up great stat lines, making flashy catches, putting people in the stands. I don't know how much better he makes your team, and I raised that point because people are talking about now there's been more chatter about trading Michael Thomas and the dead money that comes along with that. I think it's $23 million. But similarly to what the Pelicans did in offloading Eric Bledsoe, Steven Adams, the Pelicans clearly need to do that more from a personnel standpoint. And they are better without those two guys, regardless if they got the center back from Memphis or not. So my long-winded point here, George, is I wouldn't as much worry about the dead money because we do not need that malcontent in the locker room. If I've had enough, and if it makes my blood boil listening to your lead-in about this question and the cryptic tweets, and it's just like, enough, get away, get out, go. And we'll figure it out. The Saints have done salary cap gymnastics for the whole 10-year. Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton have been here. Try to get something back, but we're better. We get better immediately if we get a cheeseburger back from Michael Thomas. That's where I'm at.
I'm in this point guard role where I'm Chris Paul serving up the questions, and I'm playing David West. I like to give my own 2 cents on this one. We're in a bad spot because remember when Sean Payton first came to the Saints, he went to the diva wide receivers, Joe Horn, Dante Stallworth. He got him out of here. Didn't want to work with them. And those guys are choir boys compared to Mike Thomas. So you have to envision there are people in that organization on airline drive saying, just as you said, enough is enough. On the other side of the coin, remember all that dead money we have with Junior Gillette and Jimmy Graham and how it just put us in this salary cap Hades that we just got out of this last offseason? We cannot go back into that in wasting a big chunk of your poker chips, if you will, on dead cap space. Just useless money, a waste. That stings. That stings. So really, we have no shot other than having to try to break bread with him because you can't go back in the salary cap, Hades. You can't trade him right now, trade him for a while because his stock's low and he's not going to pass the physical for months. So I feel as though we're stuck with him at least through this year, for better or for worse, even though, like you said, there are going to be people really eager to ship him out because he is such a Debbie
Yeah,
Downer.
people, namely Sean Payton. If I'm upset about this, imagine how Sean Payton feels. Sean Payton doesn't play any games. You know, he's been around long enough. We've watched him for long enough that guys do this kind of stuff. He's a prideful, egotistical guy himself, and rightfully so to some degree with as much success as he's had from the head coaching position. But you think Sean Payton's thinking, "Oh, how do we break bread with this guy? How do we get on the same page and make Mike happy?" No, he wants to give that guy the double bird. And if it wasn't for the situation that you just brought up, George, with the salary cap, he'd ship him to the end of the earth.
Well, but that's a big if. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place because you have
And
the
I,
dead
I don't
money
I
and
don't
you
I
have
don't
this
know the
cancerous guy.
I don't know the ins and outs of the salary cap. I never have, but it seems like every year you hear about the Saints being up against the salary cap, and then they pull a rabbit out of the hat and they're able to sign this guy or this guy. Some guy takes a pay cut. I don't remember the times that you're referring to vividly, George, about Junior Gillette, dead money, and the other guy.
Jimmy Graham. Well, Jay, you act like it's no big deal to not be in salary cap because Loomis will get us out of it. Loomis getting us out of it is why we don't have Jack Rabbit at cornerback, and now why we don't have any good depth. Moving on to our next topic, Patrick Robinson, another notch on the belt on why this has been a bad summer. P-Rob, too hot. August, oh my goodness, it's too hot to be practicing out here in pads in New Orleans. I'm done. Too much sweating, too much heat. I'm retiring. I'm going to the beach. Jay, let me read you these names. After Lattimore, you got P.J. Williams, Ken Crowley, Adebo, Poole, Haley, and Prince. How do those names make you feel?
Oh boy, doesn't make me feel great, George. Even with P-Rob in there. I mean, this guy, I was interning with the Saints when he was drafted, and there were flashes that at times he looked like he could be an elite level corner in training camp, but I never really got the feeling that this guy loved football from being there. And maybe that's unfair for me to say. You know, he was a first round pick. He played 11 years in the league, which many first round picks even won't get to say. But for the most part, his career with the Saints was very underwhelming. I mean, what's your best P-Rob memory? He plays here, he shows some flashes, then he goes to Philly, he wins a Super Bowl, which is the highlight of his career. The Saints front office, it seems like, wants to justify their first round pick from years past, so they pay him a bunch of money to come back. He's injury riddled and then retires a couple of years later. So, you know, you were hoping that that money that we gave him a couple of years ago, being that we're in the position that we are in now, that he could step up to the plate, fill in one of those roles left by Jack Rabbit, and deliver and live up to that salary. But to answer your question, George, I don't feel great about those guys that you named, and I really don't have any reason to. No, I haven't been out at practice every day watching how those guys perform, but just from experience, it's hard to get fired up about. Hopefully Adebo shows us something, but Princeton Mukamara, he was a first round pick, never really lived up to the hype. He was on the Cardinals practice squad last year. PJ Williams, we know what we have there. So it's honestly, it's scary looking at our cornerback depth right now.
Scary indeed, and I'd have to imagine we're going to trade for somebody, sign somebody. You know, throughout the preseason, there might be a somewhat big name that a team doesn't want to cut because they want to trade and get an asset back for that guy because they know he's valuable. So as you start hearing names being rumbled, keep an eye on the Saints to make a move. And if I don't have a name in particular, but if I was a talented corner buried on a depth chart on another team, I'd be buzzing, texting, tweeting, calling, Instagramming, emailing my agent saying, get me to the Saints. Because anybody who's a viable cornerback in the NFL that doesn't feel as though they're getting the opportunity, we are an open door. We need talent. Like you
And
said,
George, let me ask you a question. Sorry to cut you off there, but with the Saints being in the position that they are in now, with all these paper cuts the Saints are faced with Will Lutz, with Patrick Robinson, with Ty Montgomery, even going back to your quarterback retiring, being in a position where we are desperate for help at cornerback, are we in a position where it's still win now, or it's kind of like, all right, we know, let's not leverage too much of the future because we know at our cap, at our ceiling, we are a 10-6 team that goes to a wild card, at best wins a divisional. So you're not going to leverage that much of your future. And I say that to, like, do you go out and trade a first round pick for Xavier Howard or try to get CJ Henderson? It's just kind of an interesting spot for us to be in right now.
I wouldn't trade a first rounder because of what you said, but you do put your best foot forward. CJ Henderson apparently has to be shadowed by a Jaguar staff member because he's so volatile and about to erupt. So I wouldn't take him either. But there's some names out there that no one are floating or realize could potentially be on the trading block in a few weeks. Those type of names that you might trade a 5th, 6th, 7th round draft pick to acquire. But your question is more big picture, and you still owe it to your fans who are paying the same price for season tickets to put your best foot forward. You can't say, oh, this year might be somewhat of a rebounding year. No, you have to put your best foot forward, or else that's just a disgrace. I mean, think about when you play any sport, tennis, basketball, your own pickup football, even pickleball tomorrow, Hilton, Saturday, come see your boy. You just get competitive. You don't think big picture. You want to win. So
I'm more talking from a management perspective, less than of course, from a competitive perspective, you're going to give it your all. You're going to play. You're going to do everything you can to win. But I'm talking more from a strategic perspective and going forward. Would it make sense to make some of those moves this year as opposed to next year or the year after?
No, that's Atlanta Falcons BS. You got to win. Why not win? Go for it. Why not, guys? Let's go. There's a lot of reasons why we're probably not going to win a Super Bowl. That doesn't mean just give up. I know we've been very pessimistic, and this is kind of re-energizing my who dat spirit. But no, come on, let's go. We can put something together and not just say, oh, well. Jay, moving on. Let's get some good news. I'm going to skip a topic and come back to it because I want to get some good news. Here's some names that when you follow the who's hot and who's not are the names that we keep seeing in the paper. We got Zach Bond, Ken Crowley, Callaway, Juwan Johnson, the converted wide receiver to tight end, Eric McCoy, the linebacker Werner, the first-round draft pick Peyton Turner, and the recent signing, the running back, the old dirty bird, Freeman, Devontae Freeman. So, Jay, of those names, which one, ding, 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 are you like, that's the guy I want to see shine?
I think those names, Georgie, Zach Bond, and Patrick Turner. I haven't heard a lot about Turner in training camp, but just because of all the reasons that we just discussed, and I have a hard time believing that Ken Crawley is looking great out there, and I don't know what that says about our receivers if that's the case. But if the Saints have a chance at winning 10, 11 games, don't forget it's a 17-game season this year, then Cam Jordan, we need a resurgence to 2 years ago. Marcus Davenport needs to be the guy that we traded 2 first-round picks for. And Patrick Turner needs to have a great rookie year, because a wonderful pass rush can make up for a poor secondary. And Zach Bond, if there's one thing that he can do in college, that's rush the quarterback. I think he led the Big Ten in sacks his senior year. And it really seems like a switch has gone off for him. He was a little bit slow last year in picking it up from all reports, but there have been nothing but great reports on Zach Bond this year coming out of training camp. So hopefully he can take that from airline drive into the preseason and into the season, because the front seven's really going to have to show up with the secondary looking the way it's looking right now.
I had 3 names, one of which was Turner, because I have zero faith in Davenport to live up to the expectations one gets from having 2 first-round draft picks. And if Turner can be that guy, thank the dear Lord. Eric McCoy, apparently he's been unbeatable in training camp this offseason. And that is fantastic, because you're going to have a quarterback who doesn't have the Drew Brees reps. So to have the comfort from your center and just know that, hey, you're not going to have that Fletcher Cox pressure right up the middle, and you're safe and comfortable and content, and you're like Kobe and Shaq, Chris Paul and David West, Chris Paul and Tyson Chandler, whichever Chris Paul combination you want to name, and have that quarterback feel comfortable. That is what we want. So McCoy to be a Pro Bowl, All-Pro center, love to hear that trajectory. Number 2, you said,
and he's been rock solid ever since he got in, George, in a long line of great Sean Payton centers. That'd be a good Conchurch Pisca game.
I'm ready whenever. The other name I had, and you badmouthed my man, 2017, one of the best Saints memories of my life. Jay Cutler dicing us down the field in the first quarter, throws a jump ball to the tight end Julius Thomas, the old Bronco. Oh, he's much bigger than our boy Ken Crowley. He's going to catch the ball down low like Shaq. Not so fast. Ken Crowley makes the Londoners erupt as we turn the game around and beat the Dolphins in London and Wembley. Ken Crowley, one of the best who-dat moments. So Ken Crowley.
Thanks for taking me back. I forgot Cutler played on the Dolphins and Julius Thomas. Good memory there.
Thank you. So Ken Crowley has shown you he can play. And I know it was a few years ago. I do know that. But it's mental for him. It's mental, because he had a great 2017 and half of 2018. They would bring in Eli Apple, and then his confidence goes down the drain. And maybe when he feels as though he's that guy, he doesn't have to watch anyone from behind him, then he's a good corner. But if he feels as though that he'll be yanked soon, then he's not a good corner. And I know defending Ken Crowley is the ultimate devil's advocate. I'm not going to go to Caesars and go put money on Ken Crowley to be.
I forgot he was good, George. That's a good point. I forgot he started off solid.
No, he was good. He was good.
And then he fell off. I forgot about that.
So maybe we get his confidence back and roll it. We just kind of hit on it, and I'd like to go on a little spiel about the quarterbacks. So Detillier last Monday had a fantastic observation. I'm going to recount it, and I want to hear what you have to say about it, Jay. So Drew Brees couldn't throw the ball 20 yards at the end of his career. But the reason why we could still move the ball downfield was Drew Brees was such a maestro. Before the play started, he would get everybody exactly where they needed to be. If anybody was out of position, Camaro, you're over there. Josh Hill, no, wrong side. Go to the left. Oh, I don't like this defense. Audible, audible. Go to the new play. Boom. Move the ball down the field. There was so much done before the snap that kept the offense humming, effective, efficient, even without a quarterback that could throw the ball downfield. And that was something that fantasy football will never really give you points for, or the average fan won't really understand. But Detillier is saying when he watches Jameis and clickbait, they know what they're supposed to do themselves, but they don't have the mastery of the playbook of the game of football as a whole that Drew Brees has. And it's a major difference because Jameis knows what he needs to do, but he's not telling Callaway he needs to go over there or correcting the little mistakes. And he's Detillier saying, that's going to go a long way in the regular season, and I completely agree. What do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think for Breeze to be under 6 feet tall, essentially not have the most wonderful physical skills, he had to be absolutely outstanding in everything else, intangibles, knowing the playbook, and that's why he broke so many records. So that's a good point by Detillier. George, I got a hot take on the quarterback situation. So we're hearing a lot of positive things about Ian Book, about how he's about Breeze's stature. You know, it's hard for me to comment on somebody else's comment about how the guy is a tireless worker until I really see him in the preseason. But following the NFL on social media, they're going back and showing highlights from when Dak Prescott was a rookie and what he did in his first couple of preseason games, what Russell Wilson did in his first preseason game. And yes, there are late bloomers, but I think at that quarterback position, when you pick a guy, whether it's the first round or the mid rounds, they're going to show you some promise right away. And we haven't talked about the Baltimore game a lot, George, but I am really looking forward to seeing Ian Book in that Ravens game. I don't know if he's going to play before Simeon or after Simeon, but we talked about Sean Payton earlier being a prideful guy. He's a guy that took Tony Romo from Eastern Illinois and made him into one of the best quarterbacks in Cowboys history. He's a guy that took Drew Brees, who had reconstructive shoulder surgery, was kicked out the door in San Diego, brought him to New Orleans. We all know what he turned into. So all of these guys in the quarterback room right now have a story that Peyton can kind of cling on to, as far as Winston being a guy that revived his career after being the first pick with the Bucks under Sean Payton's tutelage. A guy like Taysom Hill that was cut from the Packers. But you can say the same thing about Ian Book, who put up numbers that were the best in Notre Dame's history, but fell all the way to the fourth round because of some of the qualities of being under 6 feet, not having a strong arm, bad pocket presence. But like Breeze, comes with some of those intangibles that you can't necessarily teach, like you just mentioned, George, Winston, Taysom Hill don't have. So all this to say, I would not be shocked if you have $50. The Saints are one nagging injury away from Winston or Hill, from Ian Book all of a sudden getting in that quarterback conversation and potentially being the starter game one, or at least some point in this season. I can see it happening. And I think it's attractive for a lot of reasons. And one of those reasons being that what we talked about earlier, George, is the Saints, in reality, we're probably not going to the Super Bowl this year. Talked about the salary cap earlier. I mean, think about teams in the past, like Russell Wilson led Seahawks, that picked a mid-round quarterback and were able to do all these things with the salary cap because you're paying your head guy, your quarterback, $700,000 instead of $25 million. Now, I know I just went off on a little bit of a tangent, but something I've been thinking up the last couple of days.
I completely agree. I love that take. I wouldn't say week one, but in the NFL, we've learned many a time to expect the unexpected. So all off season, clickbait, Jameis. What about Book? What about Book? That's definitely a guy you could buy a stock and buy cheap and sell high down the road. I am very, very optimistic about his future. And I love all these great qualities. But, you kind of said it too. How much can you really take out of these off-season observation? Who's hot, who's not? I mean, pretty much we know it means nothing. It's just a little taste of the real thing, and it gets us back in the football mode. But really, there's not much that can be translated into the real game. Yet, I'm still, like you said, very optimistic about Book. Now, let's get into the game itself. But we need to be prepared for this game. We need to know what we're up against. So we need co-owner of the podcast, Shingle Percent Ownership. Let's bring in our beloved meteorologist, Red, the weatherman.
Hey, Rons, it's Red, the weatherman. And your New Orleans Saints are headed to M&T Bank and Stadium to play the Baltimore Ravens this Saturday at 6 p.m. kickoff. I would like to point out, Rons, that this is an outdoor stadium, and the weather should have a big role to play in this game. With a high of 88 degrees, it's going to feel more like 99 degrees and be fading into the afternoon. Also, not much to worry about from the wind, as it's only 6 to 9 miles per hour out of the northwest. The issue in this game, Rons, is going to be the rain. There's a 62% chance of rain, and I see that there's a couple of thunderstorms looming later on in the afternoon, which I anticipate will make the conditions pretty sloppy for this game. Also, not to mention, it's week one of the preseason, and, oh yeah, we don't have that guy named Drew Brees. Anyway, Rons, remember, whether you like it or not, it's Red, the weatherman.
That was a great report. I can't think of a single other weatherman that I would like doing our weather reports.
Thank you, Red. We love you. All right, Jay, you said one already, watching out for the quarterback, Book. First preseason game. We know what to expect in the first preseason game is always going to be a bit sloppy, really not the most pleasant to the eye. But individually, what are some players and components you're watching out for?
Yeah, I think what I'm watching out for, we hit on it a lot in the show, is the cornerback position, because I'm most worried about that position on this team. I think you can cover up average to poor receiver play. You can cover up some other positions, but the position that I want to watch most, and it might not be the best game because I know some of the receivers for Baltimore are beaten up, but I'm just looking forward to seeing the Saints play somebody in a different colored jersey, because it's hard to tell really, because it's, for the Saints, it's like weakness against weakness, or at least it appears that way with corners versus our receivers that we have now, with our number one guy being a guy named Marcus Callaway at receiver. So the cornerback position, I'll be watching George. Also, interior defensive line. I want to make sure that, the Saints can stop a running game. And Baltimore notoriously is a hard-nosed offensive team that is one of those that can run it down your throats. So with the absence of Onyemata, although he'll probably be playing in preseason, who's going to step up at that position to make sure that this isn't a glaring weakness on this team?
The four I have are: one, who can make a play other than Kamara on offense? And we shouldn't even use Kamara in the preseason. He's going to be our engine this entire season. So he shouldn't get one bruise or one scratch or one hangnail this preseason. You already know you have in him. We need him to just be our everything for this offense. Which quarterback looks more poised and capable? That more so than who's hitting the targets downfield, which of course everyone's going to be monitoring with the stat sheets, but who just looks more capable of filling that role. On D, of course, you're always intrigued by your first rounder. See what Peyton Turner looks like and which linebacker is going to emerge. A lot of young names. We brought back Quan Alexander, but we're still going to need one of these young guns to emerge right now. Zach Bonds, the name we keep hearing. So let's go with that. I'm intrigued by all these names, but one needs to step up now to solidify their place in the defense. Now, people must have really liked that first episode, and we appreciate the appreciation. So let's get to these fan questions, Jay, and we're going to tie a bow around this episode. Number one from our favorite Barrios, the number one Barrios, does our offense
Number one
have an actual chance at bailing out our defense, especially against Rodgers week one?
Yeah, I think we have a chance. It's not going to be like years past. Obviously, a little bit less confident this year, but these coaches get paid a lot of money for a reason, and I think Barrios, look for the Saints to run heavy. George talked about Kamara. They're going to feed him the rock. They brought in Devontae Freeman for a reason, and I think it's because we're really going to put a large emphasis on running the ball. In addition to Alvin and Latavius Murray, he serves as another sledgehammer. And defenses, it's going to be interesting because defenses, they're going to know that as well, knowing that you have an inexperienced tight end, inexperienced receivers, a new quarterback. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to put 7 or 8 guys in the box, and they're going to say, make Marquez Callaway get open. Make him get separation. Make this guy named Adam Troutman out of Dayton get separation. Have this guy, Jameis Winston, that broke records for most interceptions thrown, throw it up in the air 50 times, and we'll take our chances. So it's going to be interesting, that cat and mouse game of, do we pound it behind this talented, skilled offensive line? When do we take our chances? That whole cat and mouse game is going to be interesting, because with all that said about the skill positions, George, at offensive line, you might have the most talented, strong offensive line since Sean Payton got here. And I think the worst guy on your offensive line is a guy that you picked in the first round that you gave a $60 million contract extension to, that particularly in our group, we love to hate on him. But in the grand scheme of things, I think he's really not that bad. He just stands out in a particularly bad way among the other guys. So with all that said, you have a really good offensive line that you can run behind. So yes, there's a chance that we play ball control and have a shot in the fourth quarter to play with those guys.
I think that was a crazy take there at the end. This is not our best offensive line. Remember Nix, Evans, and Goodwin? That's our best offensive line. Cesar Ruiz and Pete. Big question mark.
Who are the tackles? Who are the tackles?
Jermon Bushrod and Stinchcomb, both Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, Stinchcomb doesn't hold a candle to Ramczyk.
Well, yeah, but you don't have the worries.
Bushrod is not healthy Armstead. McCoy could go to toe-to-toe with any of those centers that we had in the past.
Right. Moving on. Will Chauncey Gardner-Johnson have more 15-yard penalties or first turnovers? Question from Boris.
Take that, Georgia.
That to me is a no-brainer. Our boy, Roger Goodell. New rule. More 15-yard penalties for taunting. They want less taunting in the game. So they want these guys to beat the heck out of each other. You can't talk any trash. I'm not knocking. I'm just reporting it. No doubt about it. Chauncey's going to have more 15-yarders and forced turnovers. And that's not knocking his play, because he's sensational. He's my favorite Saint right now. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But he's going to chirp, and catch those 15-yarders. Next question. And we already kind of hit this, but we'll go over it for our boy Yancey, Daddy Yancey. I think it's time to trade Michael Thomas. What's the optimum return we do so?
Yeah, it's difficult for salary cap reasons, and also because he's hurt, so he kind of has the Saints hostage right now. George, I don't know the ins and outs of how it works and when he gets healthy. I know you said he would have to pass a physical, but does that coincide with the trade deadline? Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. But go look at what the Falcons got for Julio Jones. Now Julio Jones is older, so they got a second round pick, but it's not like you're going to get a king's ransom for Michael Thomas.
No.
Hopefully, if you were to trade him, you could get one of these positions of need, like a good quality cornerback, not somebody that's all world, but somebody that could step up maybe a couple notches below Lattimore, a couple notches above PJ Williams, and not be so scary at that position.
Jay, I kind of said it's a tough spot because of the dead money and he's a bad guy. I kind of view it this way. Mike Thomas is like a dog you bring in as a puppy. He's a puppy. He's a great part of the family. We love him. We love him. He gets to be a good dog, and you let him go out. And then at some point, when he's out and about, he just morphs and evolves into this hyena. And now you have this hyena trying to come into your family, and you're like, oh, don't play with the kids. Don't come around me, hyena. Like this is bad, And the more I think about it, you just have to swallow the pill of that dead money, so we already know that's no good. You just have to swallow that pill. And I'm now convinced throughout the talks of this podcast that for the better of the team, you just have to let him go. And the one name that flares up are the Jaguars because of Urban Meyer. They have corner depth. They do have a lot of wide receivers, so maybe you get one of their wide receivers and a corner for Mike Thomas. His stock is so low. His stock is so low because people are going to know he was built upon Drew Brees. Think of all the great wide receivers that have come through the doors. Mike Thomas isn't going to put up those numbers with the Jaguars. So by all means, if you can get something out of him, do it before you let the hyena back into the house. And that question is very similar to the one Keith Collins asked. I think Keith wants his own podcast because this is going to take up about 5 minutes to ask. But Keith, you said
give us the summary, George.
I know there's a lot of concern about the receiving corps going into this season, but part of me is wondering if we've always been this way. Going onto the field with a group of guys who might not be name brand, but we make them brandy. I'm wondering what y'all's thoughts are on this. I actually think we have a great receiving corps from what I'm hearing from Kip, even without Thomas. Juwan Johnson is apparently going to be a great dual threat blocking and receiving tight end. Fish Boy, Callaway making waves, Clickbait, Deontay, and Traquan, who is not flashy but is steady and a sure thing. Also, don't forget Kamara. Thoughts from the boys in the booth. Keith Collins.
Golly, Keith, do we have a character limit on these questions, George? I mean,
that's what I told him.
I mean, golly. But no, I understand the question, Keith, and I think, George, if you remember in the past, guys like Marcus Colston, Lance Moore, Keith is right. Devery Henderson. Yeah, a lot of homegrown talent. But I think the thing about that was they didn't all come in together at the same time, right? They were staggered across several years. So when you had a young guy that you were excited about, at least you had the experienced Lance Moore or the experienced Marcus Colston. But what it seems like to me now is like you don't have Traquan Smith is your surest guy coming back. Deontay Harris is one of your surest guys coming back. So I don't think from an odds perspective, from a numbers perspective, I'm not too hopeful that, boom, you're going to hit on all these guys, right? Callaway is going to be that number one guy that all the beats think he can be. And Deontay is going to be that number 2 guy. And this guy, McCleskey, who didn't do much at Tulane, all of a sudden is going to be Devery Henderson of the offense. And I think it's okay. It's much more natural if you got a guy like McCleskey who's coming into a situation where there is a healthy Michael Thomas. There's a healthy Deontay Harris who doesn't have a 2-game suspension. But the fact that we're depending on most of these guys that I just mentioned to be everyday role players, if not number 1, number 2 guys, that's where the cause for concern is. Not that they eventually all can't be solid wide receivers, but we're depending on them from an early point right away together, not in a staggered fashion.
Whit from Mandeville asked the same exact question in a bridge version. Last but not least, from CJ, seeing a lot of buzz on my fellow Wolverine, Cesar Ruiz lately. Can the Rons get a breakdown of PSC's thoughts for his near future this season and long-term potential? Last year, I thought Nick Easton played better, but due to the amount invested in him via the draft, you have to plug him in on the right side, which is going to be a great opportunity because you have McCoy on your left and Ramrod on your right. So he's going to have an opportunity to improve after a rookie year where he struggled a bit. Outplayed by Nick Easton isn't a good thing to be described upon as a starting guard in the NFL. But he's built like a fire hydrant. See a future for him where he can develop and gel with the great talent around him to really improve upon his subpar rookie year. That being said, Nick Easton's gone. He's your new starter. So Will Clapp is your next man up. So he goes from a cute practice squad Tiger story to a guy that we're going to count on to contribute extensively this year. And is he going to be ready to fill those responsibilities? Because Pete always goes down. Teron Armstead always goes down. So the 2 guys that are going to be plug and play throughout the season, James Hurst, who looked phenomenal as a swing tackle last year, and Will Clapp on the interior. That Clemente role is so vital because you need one more guard or center over the course of the season because those guys break down. They get beat up so much by all the big DTs. So Clapp, that's the guy I really focus on with this question because Cesar Ruiz, he's going to be all right. But when those guys break down, what's Clapp going to do? What you think, Jay?
I think you covered it, brother. I agree. I think for a lot of guys, it doesn't click right away in their rookie year. You mentioned Meacham earlier. How long did it take for him to come along? But I think what you're looking for is something that you can be encouraged about. And Ruiz, I think towards the end of the year, it seemed like he started to get it. And I really don't have concerns about him going into this year, moving to guard. I think we're going to be all right up front, George, on the offensive line. And I think, like I said earlier, this is going to be one of Peyton's best offensive lines in his tenure.
Yeah, and I think when people listen to this podcast, what people are going to really provoke thought upon will be what to do with Mike Thomas. And even in the course of this episode, I've kind of gone back and forth because it's a really tough question on what to do with him. So that'll be a storyline for better or for worse. It's not like a fun topic. It's not Trey Hendrickson leading the league in sacks type of storyline, but it's kind of the hammer being dealt with how he's acting and what he's saying. And it's just not the best storyline. We'll cover whatever y'all want. We love whatever y'all send in. So we appreciate all the fan questions. Keep sending in Mike Thomas questions. Whatever you want to talk about, I'll answer questions about any topic. I'll tell you all about what Jay wants to talk about too. Jay, last but not least, let's bring the world in, gather some excitement for, hey, finally some football this preseason.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ron's not here, but he wanted me to remind y'all if you need nuclear energy, he's in St. Francisville, and to give him a shout. But football, more importantly, is back, and it's being played in front of fans. And how cool was that baseball game last night, George? Do you see the highlights of that game in Iowa? Field of Dreams, walking out of the cornfields. Yankees take the lead to go up 1, and then Tim Anderson walk-off home run. It was pretty neat. Fireworks going off in the cornfields, fans going crazy. Look, I am fired up to get fans back in the stadium. It's a whole different ball game. Yes, this Delta variant is freaking depressing, but let's go on. Let's get the excitement back in the dome. Do whatever you got to do to get in there for the game on the 20th against the Jaguars. For me personally, George, I think I'm more excited about this preseason than I have been in a while, just because in the past you have so many of the same faces coming back. You know what you're going to get to some extent, where I might need to print out a roster for this game and say, who's number 20? Who's number 8? Who's number 6? Especially with these guys, you got defensive linemen wearing single digits now. It just throws you off a little bit. So I'm excited for the Saints to go up against another competitor. The only thing that I've really watched, guys, is Instagram, Twitter snippets here and there. And I'm relying on Gus Cattingill and Larry Holder and Jeff Duncan, which seems like the same old every day to give me my report. So I look forward personally to watching it with my own 2 eyes. And then soon enough, the Houdats will be facing off against the Aaron Rodgers-led Packers in the Superdome. So we're getting close. All that to say is we are getting close.
All right, Ron, in a week away from UTO, we'll see you there. We love you. We're out.
A rainbow in Marrero, huh? A rainbow in Marrero, what? A rainbow in Marrero, huh? A rainbow in Marrero, yeah. I got a bunch of friends that I don't really like. I'd sell them out in a minute if the money was right. People think I'm smart, they say I'm a genius. Got a Audi belly button that looks like a penis. Making out with your mouth because